Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me today because we are diving into one of the most fascinating and, frankly, mind-blowing paradoxes in all of modern history. We're talking about the story of Alfred Nobel. It's a real roller coaster of a tale. We're going from the absolute depths of poverty to unimaginable wealth, pushing through incredible scientific breakthroughs, navigating heartbreaking family tragedy, and ultimately uncovering a secret, last-minute quest for redemption. Right off the bat, we're faced with the ultimate historical irony. How exactly did the inventor of dynamite become the father of the Peace Prize? Today, you hear the name Nobel, and you instantly think of the absolute pinnacle of human achievement, right? Brilliant scientific minds, legendary authors, champions of international peace. But the guy who actually funded this whole legacy, he built his empire by creating one of the deadliest, most destructive substances known to humanity at the time. So how does someone go from selling high-grade explosives to rewarding global peace?
Act 1. The Ascent from Poverty to Prosperity.
To really understand this crazy pivot, we have to rewind to the very beginning, a time completely removed from the massive wealth and prestige we associate with him today. Back in 1833, Alfred was born in Stockholm, Sweden, into a family that was incredibly impoverished. Out of 8 children, actually only Alfred and his 3 brothers survived past childhood. His father, Emmanuel, was an engineer who suffered a completely devastating bankruptcy and even had to leave the country. But things turned around drastically. By 1842, the family reunited over in St. Petersburg, Russia. Emmanuel had managed to build a highly successful business manufacturing machine tools and explosives. Suddenly, the Nobels were flush with cash, and that prosperity allowed young Alfred to get private tutoring. By 1850, he was officially off to Paris to study chemistry. Now, what's truly astonishing about this guy was just his sheer raw brilliance. By the time he was a young adult, he was completely fluent in 6 different languages: Swedish, French, Russian, English, German, and Italian. He was even writing poetry in English on the side. And what's maybe even more remarkable is that he basically mastered chemistry without ever officially attending a university for it. His brain just absorbed science and languages like a sponge. That intense, endless curiosity led him to file his very first patent, which was an English patent for a gas meter, at the super young age of 24. So the stage is perfectly set for his life as this globe-trotting inventor. Act 2. The Breakthrough and the Tragedy. The Chemistry of Power. Of course, invention always comes with risks, and Nobel's life was about to become intrinsically tied to the chemistry of power. While he was studying in Paris, he actually met Ascanio Sobrero. Now, Sobrero was the chemist who had synthesized nitroglycerin just 3 years prior. At the time, everybody was using traditional gunpowder. It was everywhere, but it had pretty limited power. Nitroglycerin, on the other hand, massively powerful. But it was wildly, dangerously unpredictable. A tiny change in heat or a little bump could set it off. Sobrero warned everyone against using it. But Nobel? He became totally obsessed with taming this volatile liquid. He was convinced that if he could just figure out how to make it safe, it would completely revolutionize global construction and mining. But that obsession came with a really terrible, tragic cost. On September 3rd, 1864, the high stakes of his dangerous experiments finally caught up with him. A preparation shed at his family's factory in Stockholm exploded. The blast killed 5 people, and tragically, one of them was Alfred's own younger brother, Emil. This devastating loss just completely shook the family to its core, and the local authorities immediately stripped Alfred of his license to produce any explosives in that area. He was definitely fazed, but he wasn't defeated. Nobel actually moved his operation to a much more isolated area. He took all of that immense grief and guilt and channeled it into this relentless, singular pursuit for safety. And in 1867, he finally gets his breakthrough. He patents a brand new substance. To kind of reestablish his name and, distance his new product from the super deadly reputation of straight nitroglycerin, he decides to name it Dynamite. He pulled that right from the Greek word dynamis, which literally means power. Okay, let's look at the chemistry behind this for a second, because it brilliantly illustrates his genius. He realized you just couldn't use liquid nitroglycerin safely on its own. So, first, you start with that highly dangerous liquid. Second, you mix it into an absorbent, inert substance called Kieselguhr, which is basically diatomaceous earth. It essentially acts like a giant sponge. And third, you get your result, dynamite. Suddenly, it's moldable, it's totally stable, and most importantly, workers could actually handle it safely, transport it, and pack it into bored holes for mining operations. It was an absolute game changer for the entire age of engineering. Dynamite completely changed the world, and for sure, it changed Alfred Nobel's life. 355. That is the staggering total number of international patents Nobel held during his lifetime. From dynamite, he just kept going, inventing even more powerful explosives like gelignite and ballistite. He ended up building an absolute global empire, setting up more than 90 different armaments and explosives factories around the world. He amassed phenomenal wealth and easily became one of the richest men in all of Europe.
Act 3. The Turning Point. A Mistaken Identity.
So all of this massive wealth and runaway success leads us straight to a bizarre, almost unbelievable journalistic mistake that literally altered the course of human history. In 1888, while Alfred was hanging out in France, his older brother Ludwig passed away. But somehow, several French newspapers completely mixed the brothers up. Believing that the incredibly famous inventor of dynamite had died, they printed obituaries for Alfred instead. Think about that. This gave Alfred Nobel the incredibly rare, totally surreal opportunity to sit down with a cup of coffee and read his own legacy while he was still very much alive.
And what he read absolutely horrified him. One major obituary famously declared, Le Marchand de la Mort est mort. The merchant of death is dead. The paper ruthlessly went on to say that Dr. Alfred Nobel, who became rich by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before, died yesterday. Wow. Just imagine waking up and reading that about yourself. Nobel was just appalled. In his own mind, he actually viewed himself as a pacifist. He genuinely thought his weapons were so terrible, they would deter war altogether. But the world? They saw him simply as a merchant of death, and it hit him like a ton of bricks. If he dropped dead right then and there, this dark, blood-soaked legacy was exactly how history was going to remember him.
Act 4. The Ultimate Legacy. Funding the Future.
Well, Nobel completely refused to let the Merchant of Death be his final chapter. He decided right then to secretly orchestrate the greatest redemption arc in scientific history. On November 27, 1895, at the Swedish-Norwegian Club in Paris, Nobel sat down by himself and quietly signed his last will and testament. It was literally just a one-page document. He didn't consult his vast network of relatives. He didn't tell a single business partner. In this quiet, totally solitary act, he completely overwrote his own legacy with just the stroke of a pen.
Now, the sheer scale of his redemption here is just breathtaking. When his will was eventually read, it sent shockwaves through the world and totally blindsided his family. He left just 6% of his vast assets to his relatives and to cover the taxes. A staggering 94% of his total estate was ordered to be placed into a trust, and the goal? To establish a series of annual prizes for people who confer the greatest benefit to humankind. Almost everything he had spent his entire life building was instantly handed over to the public good.
To put that 94% into a relatable perspective, we're talking about 31,225,000 Swedish kroner. That was the raw value of the assets he donated. For the year 1895, that was a completely astronomical, mind-boggling sum of money. It was a philanthropic donation of such an incredible magnitude that it literally took years of fighting to sort out the legalities and actually establish the foundation to manage all that cash.
So he directed this vast fortune into 5 specific categories that he personally felt were absolutely crucial for humanity's progress. The original Nobel Prizes were set up for physical science, chemistry, medical science or physiology, literary work, and most profoundly of all, peace. I mean, think about the incredible irony here. The guy who literally invented dynamite and owned over 90 armament factories specifically mandated a massive prize for the person who did the most for the suppression or reduction of standing armies and the establishment of peace congresses. The Merchant of Death transformed himself into the ultimate patron of peace.
A little over a year after he secretly signed that fateful will, Alfred Nobel died of a stroke. It was December 10, 1896, at his villa in San Remo, Italy, and he was 63 years old. Predictably, his family was initially completely furious about the will, and they contested it fiercely in court. But his final wishes eventually prevailed. His death, as it turned out, wasn't actually the end of his story at all. It was really just the beginning of his true, lasting legacy.
Which brings us right back to the incredible power of reflection. If you could read your own obituary today, how would it change your tomorrow? Alfred Nobel was given the incredibly rare, super painful gift of seeing his worst possible legacy printed in black and white, and he used his entire fortune to rewrite it. It really goes to show how one piece of paper and one really powerful decision can completely transform how history remembers you forever. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and I'll catch you next time.